Thank the chairwoman, and it's like deja vu all over again. Here we are talking about housing. And housing truly is important, but it's one of many things that are important within the Financial Services Committee. But of course, when you're homeless, one of your priorities is to get housing. But let's talk about the whole scope of housing within our committee. Housing affordability and homelessness have been used really as a proxy to try to implement Bernie Sanders' socialist agenda. A lot of Democrats feel betrayed because they voted for Joe Biden, not Bernie Sanders. But what we're voting on here in the House is gussied up, rebranded, called something else, but it's really Bernie's agenda. Massive spending is already fueling inflation, and it's destroying the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar. And who does this hurt the most? Retirees and working class Americans. Despite how much President Biden and his staff would like to think that inflation is, quote, a high-class problem, it is the working class who suffer most when you destroy the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar. Just to quote one of our witnesses from earlier today, speaking to you, Madam Chairwoman, was John Harrison. He was formerly homeless and now works for Prince George's County Department of Social Services, and he said that the housing vouchers aren't going as far anymore because of the price of housing. Housing isn't deflating, it's getting more expensive. And the more money we dump into the market, the more expensive it gets. And this highlights one of the problems at the Federal Reserve. They provided essential stability when this crisis first hit in March and April of 2020. The market needed liquidity and they provided important backstops. But since then, they've continued to inflate the housing market. They're adding $40 billion a month of mortgage-backed securities purchases. It's driving up the housing values by funding the market, fueling low interest rates that are putting that cash out of dollars into property. So then when people go out and they say, well, the good thing about inflation, because we heard from our press secretary that inflation's actually a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Well, most people don't think it's a good thing, but okay, if you got a raise 2 or 3%, I guess that's good, except it's not keeping up with inflation that's at 5 to 8%. But even if you got one of those raises, what's happening to the money? What's happening to the money? You get a raise, and if you're on the edge in a safety net program and you're starting to work your way out of it, you could hit a benefit cliff. So this is why I want to talk about a bill I've got called the People-Centered Assistance Reform Effort. And it's designed to create a commission that would work together, 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats. They get a year and a half to work together. And what could they do? Well, they couldn't cut spending, but they could redesign the program. So instead of 5 programs intended to accomplish the same purpose, you could have one common goal and one set of funds. And you could have on-ramps and off-ramps in that program. But whatever they do, it would be up to the commission, and then Congress would get a vote. So here's the solution. Our safety net programs cost our country about $1 trillion a year. This isn't Social Security or Medicare. This is just means-tested programs. Collectively, 90-plus programs, $1 trillion a year. And they're hard to administer, they're expensive to administer, and they're not incredibly effective. As the 31 hearings we've had in the Committee on Housing highlight, the system, in spite of the resources, aren't effective because we aren't using them well. So this commission, I hope everyone in the committee would co-sponsor, because it doesn't advantage or disadvantage any one party, and frankly, it goes way beyond the scope simply of this committee to look at the whole safety net and to deal with benefit cliffs. Mr. Dickerson, in the time we have left, could you just highlight how important it is to deal with the cost of the impact of inflation, and when you look at the means-tested programs, what are the impact of I guess, maladministration in some of those programs?
I think that's a great question. The Ways and Means Committee has produced a really interesting infographic that has this crazy spider web of more than 80-plus means-tested welfare programs that exist at the federal level. And it just has to be incredibly difficult to navigate. We've spent trillions and trillions of dollars since the war on poverty was declared without a measurable advancement in outcomes. And so I do think that's a really important thing that Congress should be examining. How do we get better results for people and make it so that we can have an opportunity society? and allow people to not have to depend on federal government welfare programs.
Thank you so much for that. And look, it's important that we explore these issues, and it's really important that we work together where we can agree. Because obviously with two parties, we disagree about some things. But we've got really in the House a leadership in Speaker Pelosi, and frankly some of our other leaders that are opposed to working with any colleagues on any issue. And I yield back.